of information from the National Center for Geographic Information Analysis, which is at the University of Buffalo. Provides a very rich set of tools. What that was soil types, subsurface fault lines, streets, roads, rivers for Erie County in a database. A lot of that now is more publicly accessible. In 2001, that was something that only the high priests of GIS had available. We have a few of them, and priestesses on campus. Next slide. This is just a timeline of dealing with the city. At first I thought it was really nice. I was going to do this and give the information to the city until I realized the city's lawyer did not really want information like this. So I got my first lessons in the politics of, in those kinds of politics. In any case, we put in about 7 to 8 years worth of research effort. Next slide. So part of it was to overlay historic maps. This is a map from 1988, or 1978, sorry, that shows where the sites were on the plant that were torn down, all the railroad lines from the time. And you see the blue lines, those are property lines that my student Eleanor Coffey hand-scanned in from paper data from City Hall. Nowadays, you can download that information from the city and county website, so it's a much easier prospect. Next slide shows a blow-up, and I'll just point out that there was a park in the neighborhood. The neighborhood existed as a residential neighborhood since the 1920s. In fact, there's a very famous legal case where a resident of this neighborhood in the 20s sued the steel mill because of air pollution coming in the house, and the judge's decision was that the company had the right to pollute their neighbors. So, a very famous environmental law case. That park was found to be heavily contaminated with arsenic, the source of which we could never exactly determine. And it's one of only 3 areas that's actually been remediated in this neighborhood. And it was remediated to the fence line, not to where the contamination was. Next slide. So, I've already said this. Next slide. So here's a basic map of the neighborhood produced with the GIS analysis, and this is the maximum benzoate pyrene equivalent data, or the PAH data from the Koch. Here are the 4 lots that were remediated, the brown areas. You'll notice the black data is anywhere between 20 parts per million to, 20 parts per billion to 2469. The health department, which doesn't happen in New York State very often, actually came in and said this is an immediate health risk exposure. It was an open lot. It's never been remediated. The neighborhood wondered why it stopped at the fence. Next slide. Okay. Despite my best efforts, I'm going to take a few more minutes. Next slide. So I'm going to propose to you some work we've been doing that gets at a very meaty problem, and that is community members who are concerned about how background levels are determined and how cleanups are driven by defining what's an elevated level. The site-specific background is something that there are a lot of procedures to develop, and using geographic information analysis can develop a method to use the data on site to determine the site-specific background for that site. So what we did was take the data and use spatial statistics to evaluate the spatial distributions and test the different proposed background levels to see how much of the data can be statistically analyzed as relevant to a particular background level. Next slide. So we did this for both lead. We combined both the lead